A warm welcome to Big Talk here on from the nation's capital, Abuja, live on global televisions. A lot of political developments in the country. The projection of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's visit to France has continued to spark a whole lot of concern. The state of Port Harcourt refinery has still led to a whole lot of contributions, sparking controversies as to how they are supplying and the distribution process of how all of this will affect the prices of the product. And away from that, it looks that the northern governors and the many northerners are still in loggerheads with the tax reforms bills already at the National Assembly. I recall last week, it scaled toward the second reading. It looks that those that are still having interpretation about the timing, the process, the consultations has continued to be the defense of many northerners in respect to the bill, the tax reform bills. But all of that is still a bit of a development politically in the country. But tonight, we'll be diving into the fact that President Tinubu has wrapped up his historic two-day state visit to France. Recall he was accompanied by the First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, ministers, governors, state officials, and some captains of industry on the trip. The president was hosted by the French President Emmanuel Macron and the wife, Marie-Claude Macron. Their visit, among other things, underscored the effort to strengthen the economic cooperation between Nigeria and France, with a particular focus on boosting ties in English-speaking Africa. Tinubu had visited France at a different time since he assumed office. The trips have been private. The historic visit to France commenced on Thursday last week, marking the Nigerian leader's first official visit to the country in over 2 decades. There are those that are really having the show of concern that Tinubu was trying to use the visit to deepen the both economic and diplomatic ties of both countries, focusing on key areas such as agriculture, security, education, health, youth engagement, and all of that is still a very major discussion in the country. Tonight, we'll be joined by the Chairman Emeritus Nigerians on Diaspora Organization in Europe, and the Global Affairs Analyst joins us from Belgium tonight to express the concern that have been raised by Nigerians, that those that feels should Nigeria cut ties with France at the moment, also considering the fact that some African countries are cutting ties with France. What is the implication of this visit? What does this underscore for President Tinubu's diplomatic order in respect to having a closer a relationship with other countries in respect to salvaging the country's situations, economic, agriculture, security, energy, and the rest, which that those that feels is also a mutual. Collins Nweke is a Global Affairs Analyst, the Chairman Emeritus Nigerians on Diaspora Organization Europe. He joins us live from Belgium tonight to extract the implication of the President Tinubu's visit to France. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. I mean, that those are really having concern. How key, how important is this visit to France? Is it timely, looking at also the pullout of some African countries trying to cut ties with France? What is your assessment about the passionate visit? Because it looks that Mr. President was well received, at France.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. Well, indeed, Mr. President, President Bola Tinubu was very, very warmly received, which was a very good thing because, France is very, very good at this moment, So the fact that he received a warm welcome, he was warmly dressed, so too was the beautiful First Lady of Nigeria. All of those ensured a convivial start of the state visit, which was a crucial one, like you mentioned, because this is the first over the last 24 years, even though President Buhari on a personal ground and, and all of that had visited France, a number of times since taking office as president of Nigeria. But you see, this particular state visit, as the name suggests, is official, and that is the highest level of diplomatic niceties between two nations. So he visited on the invitation of President Emmanuel Macron, who had actually visited Nigeria himself, lived there, as a matter of fact. So he accepted the invitation and went there. I think, like you mentioned, the key question in the mouths of very many people is why now? Why Nigeria? And why, why indeed President, Bola Tinubu? Well, you don't need to look very deep to find the answer. Because, as you know, France has been under increasing attack by, the Francophone African nations, the former colonies of France. Their relationship had gone sour. Over the years, they have been, complaining of all sorts of things that weren't going well, the close ties of French economy to their economies to the point of control. Some have actually mentioned that, they may have gotten independence, but, economically and politically, France's, the hands of France, the invisible hands of France, continue to meddle in the affairs of these, African countries. And then what topped it was the, several coups that took place in a number of those countries. So you see, this invitation, no matter how we twist and turn it, is actually a step by France under Macron in the direction of beginning to rebuild the Africa Partnership of France. And so they have kind of, taken a step away from the Francophone African countries because, the relationship is frosty at this moment. And so there is a need to also try the Anglophone African country. And where else than Nigeria as the dominant economy of Africa, but also Africa's superpower. And added to the fact that at this moment, President Bola Tinubu is the president of ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. So all of these, factors and elements put together actually points us to why President Bola Tinubu's invitation and visit on, state visit to France is a very, very strategically thought out one by France, and Nigeria under President Tinubu accepted the opportunity with both hands.
I mean, a whole lot of, perspective right there. But let's take a look at what may be very directly beneficial to the country. Looking at the state of the economy, looking at the whole situations in Nigeria. I mean, it looks at the citizens somehow afraid of some, ties, some collaboration, and some bilateral relations, even put it into that perspective, which to them, they are likely feeling that it may be something that may witch hunt Nigerians in the future, because we've also seen how past relationships with at turn the upside down, and which is still the growing fears of many Nigerians. What do you speak to such Nigerians who may be likely having that perception towards this visit to France?
Yeah, a very important point there, Michael, because obviously Nigerians are very vocal people. That is no secret anymore. It doesn't matter whether it concerns Nigeria or it concerns Nigeria's neighbors. Nigerians are never the ones to hide their feelings, and I believe that a number of discerning Nigerians perceive France and the actions they have taken towards their neighbors, the Nigerian neighbors, the Francophone African countries in the past years. As neo-colonial kind of actions. And when you also view it this time around from the diplomatic, circle, you will ask yourself, what is the focus of Nigeria's foreign policy? The focus of Nigeria's foreign policy since independence in 1960 has been a focus on Africa, what the so-called consensus treatism. which denotes, as a matter of fact, that Africa is the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. Nigeria wants to see a strong and vibrant Africa, and from that position of advantage, they will now be able to face the rest of the world. So what that essentially means is that Nigeria has always stood there as the big brother for all African countries. It wasn't very long ago that apartheid in South Africa fell. Nigeria was one of the key pillars that actually ensured the collapse rather of apartheid. You remember the ECOMOG, troops that had to be sent to the neighboring African country, West African country, to keep peace there, secure the peace, and all of that. So these are bits and pieces of what Nigeria as a government has done, but also with the support of Nigerian citizens. So Nigerians are very suspicious of France in this move to rebuild partnership with Africa, using Nigeria as a strategic partner. And we know also that Nigerians are very pragmatic. Pragmatic in the sense that, number one, if France shows readiness to actually treat, the neighboring African countries, including Nigeria also, as equal partners, a win-win relationship, where the left hand washes the right and the right hand washes the left, Nigerians are so very welcoming of such relationship. But what Nigerians will not stomach is a situation where France comes in cunningly, trying to use Nigeria as a second stepping stone in its exploitation of Africa, both in terms of the human resources, both in terms of actually implanting people of their choices into different government positions, more or less, leaving Africa high and dry. Nigerians won't, stomach that. And so when you hear some, dissenting voices, it's not that, President Macron is not welcome to partner with Nigeria, but the Nigerians are desirous to see a fair and equitable relationship, and they rely on President Bola Tinubu to secure that for Nigeria and by extension the rest of Africa.
Let's quickly look at issues of economic independence, because you understand that Nigeria has been, a strong advocate, for when we look at the issues of a single currency, and which it looks at most often time has clashed with that of France. How do we manage these interests? We're also trying to extend, the capacity within West Africa, and likely looking at all the French-speaking countries earlier colonized, and which are still in much interest to France. How do we manage these, and understanding the fact that we likely are having, two loggerheads in respect to some of these economic independence, ideology by Nigeria and that of France?
Absolutely. Nigeria has always been an advocate for financial autonomy, particularly in the ECOWAS sub-region. Now, let's not, forget the fact that at this moment, stocks are really, high to secure a single currency for, West Africa called the ECO. Now, this is something that clashes with France's, support for the CFA franc, like the safest. Now, while ECOWAS, under President Tinubu, who has actually made, quite a number of stringent, steps since becoming president about a year and a half ago, to ensure that ECO as a single currency for West Africa comes to life, France is actually doing everything it can, mainly clandestinely, to see that effort, actually fails, because the link between the currency being used in, the Francophone African countries, which is CFA franc, is intrinsically linked with the French economy, to the extent that it is actually the minister of, the finance of France and the French central bank that actually controls, the currency that they use in those countries. So you see, this is something that kind of runs contra with the priorities and the objectives of President Bola Tinubu. Now, one will hope that in a meeting, in the state visit that just concluded, that they would have at least discussed it. Nobody is expecting that they are going to have, a total breakthrough immediately. But I think it's going to be moderate as well to actually avoid it, because it is a contentious issue. Now, we do not have, the magic ball to know what happened there, the kind of, secret conversations that they had. But we would imagine that at least they would have tried to find a common ground that would enable ECO as a common currency for West Africa to come to reality, but in a way that collaboration with France, economically and otherwise, is also, strengthened, that they don't leave France high and dry as well. But what cannot be conceived of is a situation where ECO as a single currency fails just because France does not support it, just because France supports CFA franc.
All right. Before we delve into other issues, I would love to ask, do you feel that, France is ready for an honest dialogue in respect to all of this? Because there's one thing about Nigeria to be ready. What can be from, I understood you earlier, I highlighted some of those benefits, but does it likely look that they are ready for a very sincere dialogue in respect to pushing all of this, because they are losing trust in the region? And if this move is necessary by the president in a bid to highlighting all of that partnership that the spokesman to the president have highlighted at the end of the visit, do you feel that this dialogue is sincere from France?
Well, it's difficult to say. Like they say, the devil is in the detail, and the details here are some of those contentious issues that kind of divide nations. There are huge number of areas where France and Nigeria see eye to eye. Take, for instance, economic cooperation and all of that. Quite a lot of French investments are in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, as at 2023, which is the last available figure, French investment in Nigeria stands at about $10 trillion. That is huge amount of money, and they continue to invest in different areas, and there are perspectives as well. For instance, the energy transition, to clean energy. France has the technology, and Nigeria is a fertile ground for them to, bring in such a technology, not as philanthropy, but as, investment, because there is huge money for French, companies to make in all of that. So there are quite an array of areas that they can collaborate. But there are also, issues that actually divide them. And it is difficult to know how sincere France is. But one point is very clear. Number one, some points are very clear. Number one, this invitation was extended to President Tinubu by France, which means that there is something in it for France. Number two, France is actually in a very, very weak and precarious position right now, considering the frosty relationship he has with, his former colonies. And it needs Nigeria's help. That's number three now. It needs Nigeria's help to make a new start in Africa, and then trying to rebuild the, frosty relationship with the former colonies. Now, if France doesn't realize that there is a need for them to be very, very open and transparent, I think it's not going to be a lasting and sustainable relationship if it even manages to take off as well. But let's not make a mistake about one point, and that is that France doesn't come to the table empty-handed. They also have a number of things. You can call it trade-offs. That they want to put before Nigeria and see if Nigeria is in a position to do that. Let me just throw one out there for the viewers, and that is the setup of military base, French military base in Africa. They have been sent packing by their former colonies as part of the imbroglio between them. Now, it could very well be that France will be courting Nigeria to see the extent to which Nigeria will be prepared to host a French base in Nigeria, from where they can now, be in a position to monitor not only insurgencies in Nigeria, Boko Haram, banditry, and all of that, but also protecting French businesses and French interests, not only in Nigeria, but in the entire sub-region. Some would say unspeakable. Collins, why are you even raising this at all? I know. But you see, these are negotiations, and there is something called reciprocity. Now, you watch the left hand, and the left hand watches the right watches the left. Now, it depends on what Nigeria is getting in return. But, at this stage, you don't leave anything off the table, just by way of an expanded example.
All right. I mean, we also, of course, highlighted earlier, the partnership led to some agreement looking at 300 million euros in diverse financial and technical assistance programs, which will span through the geopolitical zones in Nigeria. They are also committed to enhancing mutual trade, improving the cross-border services, and eliminating the fiscal barriers. They also reached an agreement laying a foundation for a strong and lasting Nigeria-France collaboration with a far-reaching implication for both nations and economic growth. But let me quickly let's get to the immigration policy, because we understand how tough France, have been retreating due to these immigration policies. How is this workable? Because there are a few Nigeria, especially this government, that are talking so much tough against Jagba, decrying the state of the brain drain in the country and all of that. Do you feel that this is for the better of our population? Because it looks that the growing population unemployment is really fueling these migration from many parts of the country.
Yeah, President Macron is in a very, very difficult, situation when it comes to migration. And he's not alone in that. I believe that, at this point in history, Europe is dealing with a very, very fundamental upsurge of, far-right political elements who are actually seizing on a number of, global crises, a number of, financial hardship, economic hardship, and all of that, and indeed, the cost of living crisis in Europe, to actually look around for a scapegoat, and their easy scapegoats are immigrants. Now, they tell their citizens that the reasons things are tough for them is because their country, is being run over by, immigrants. And so that has meant that, voters listen to them. And liberal, parties like those of, the party of Emmanuel Macron actually have had to now adapt their policies to actually, make immigration stricter. And President Tinubu has not wasted time in letting, France know that Nigeria cannot accept a situation where their citizens in France are treated, badly. And so that is, yes, indeed, a contentious, point of negotiation. But I believe that there are sufficient Nigerians in France and the rest of Europe that are doing fantastically well, contributing to the economy, and actually helping to build, a modern Europe that ultimately they will find a common ground. But you see, immigration has become a Europe-wide, issue. And what I will imagine is that President Tinubu would have possibly secured France's, commitment in actually pleading for a fairer immigration level, a fairer immigration policy at the European level. Don't forget that Emmanuel Macron is a very, very powerful voice within the EU. So that is the best that one could hope for. And, it is expected that they would have, had some understanding in that regard.
All right. Before I let you go, can you speak very briefly on Nigeria's ambition in the United Nations Security Council? Is still topping the gears of diplomatic relations. Do you feel that having these common grounds with France may be an eye-opener or an assistance to the dreams of Nigeria?
Well, it's again another beautiful point that you've raised there, Michael, and that is why when I talk to people who want to close the door on everything and say, I rule this out, I rule that out, I always tell them, leave your card open and negotiate. Because, you see, one of the ambitions of Nigeria is, to be a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It is conceivable and it is also doable. Now, given that, Africa has a very, very strong influence in Africa, in the world. Now, people who do not realize it are actually missing the entire point because, it is not for no reason that, the rest of the world are running to Africa. I mean, Africa has suddenly become that beautiful bride that everybody wants. And that is because of, the huge economic opportunities in Africa, raw materials, huge and vibrant youth populations and all of that. So, Nigeria having a seat in the Security Council representing Africa is very much desirable. And France is such a powerful world in global politics, particularly within the United Nations, that if Nigeria has France's support in securing a seat, a permanent seat in the Security Council, that would be a very, very big win, not only for Nigeria, but for Africa. Again, it will not come without a trade-off. What is going to be the trade-off for such, facilitation role that France could play for Nigeria? Those who are within the, inner circle of President Tinubu would know the sort of conversations that actually went on. What I do not want to imagine is the fact that such was not on the agenda at all. I expect that it would have been on the agenda, and hopefully he would have secured Macron's commitment to push for Nigeria in that regard.
A very big thanks to Collins Work, Global Affairs Analyst and Chairman Emeritus Nigerians and Diaspora Organization. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on the program, Big Talk Tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you so very much, Michael, for having me. Wishing your station huge success.
Always. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. We'll now turn our attention to very numerous challenges confronting the education in Africa. It looks that due to the insecurity, lack of funding, and political instability in the region has continued to draw the attentions of stakeholders. And tonight we'll be diving into that issues due to also highlighting how they can tackle the critical issues and access to the education, the rising costs associated with it, the campus insecurity, and lack of funding in the students community. On the program tonight, we'll be diving into that, and I'll be speaking with the student leader of All African Student Union, joining us here on the program live to discuss this issue. Just stay with us on the program. I'll be right back.